You are launching something new in a very hot topic, which is GEO or AEO. I think we can start here. Like, we don't even know. It's so new and changing so much the way we think about SEO and how to find things using LLMs instead of search engines, that the name itself is not fixed. Like, maybe we can start here. Like,
No,
can
it
you
isn't.
can you introduce yourself quickly, where you come from, what you have done before, and what you're currently doing with your new adventure with this hot topic?
I've been in tech for just over 10 years now. I started off founding a hardware and software hybrid product in smart locks. Back 10 years ago in France, so we had a manufacturing line and a software offer as well. Built a team and sold that business after 5 years back in 2021. I then decided, hey, actually, hardware is hard. I prefer to stay in software. The pace of change and development is a lot faster. So I had the pleasure to join PhantomBuster back in 21, where I joined as chief of staff, but I quickly took over the marketing and actually all of the revenue, because it's a pure PLG motion. There was no sales team, and our main acquisition channel was content. Back then there was no LLMs. ChatGPT didn't exist when I joined. It was good old SEO, writing articles and making sure that they ranked in Google. And then just more recently this summer, I decided to do a switch and to go back into founder mode. And with a couple of others, we're building Cited. And Cited is, I would say, it's a hybrid between a traditional content agency and software. And our real goal is to build content engineering workflows for our clients that will enable them to produce citation grade content that will get them appearing and, most importantly, being recommended by LLMs. Is it AEO? Is it GEO? I was actually researching that just last week for my own positioning, and it turns out that 70%, I think, of marketers use the term GEO, and about 40% use AEO. So it's still quite interchangeable, but it seems like GEO is winning as a go-to term. Some people have tried to define like AEO is the answers in Google and GEO is a broader category. At the moment, I think a lot of people are using them interchangeably, and there's no defined meaning that it's accepted across the board. I think today we can just use GEO or AEO interchangeably as we prefer.
We'll go with GEO for this episode, but it's so new and it's still moving. That might change. Maybe this episode will be outdated in 2 weeks. We never know with those things. You mentioned multiple things, and I like the content engineering part. That's very interesting, and we'll dive deeper in that later in the conversation. But for the complete beginners like me, I know what SEO is. I've been, I'm aware about it, and I've been making content for quite a while on LinkedIn and on social, so I know it helps your ranking and stuff like that. But for the audience that is beginners like me, what is GEO in general? What's the link with SEO? If you had to simplify, how does it look for you when you do GEO?
That's a really good question. I would say, I guess at its most fundamental, GEO is ensuring that your brand is both mentioned, cited, recommended by LLMs. So it's all three things. You want to be appearing in an answer that is provided by a large language model. And that large language model might be an AI overview in Google. It might be Google's AI mode. It might be ChatGPT or Claude, whatever you're using. That's ensuring that LLMs can understand you and your business as an entity. They can position you, and ultimately they recommend you. And I think that's a fundamental difference with SEO, is that SEO is about ranking for searches. And whilst Google did have an element of judgment, Google would sort of judge what they call like your domain authority, sort of, is this a reliable source of information? And therefore, do we want to be ranking these pages for search queries? They didn't necessarily make a recommendation as to whether you should use a product or not. When you now ask an LLM what's the best product for this, instead of getting a list of articles that you go and read, an LLM of course gives you a recommendation. And there's some research, I think Kevin Indig put some research out a couple of weeks ago showing that in Google AI mode, I think it's up to 70% of people end up going with that number one recommendation.
Interesting.
So it's really quite important, and it shows the power of LLMs and how people more and more are trusting LLMs to make decisions for them. And actually, to go even further, I guess you, as a GTM engineer, you use Claude Code. At times, we even have agents making technical choices, tooling choices, and implementing tooling choices for us without even our knowledge. I was building an app the other day and Claude went and set up an account on Railway for me, chose Railway, set up an account and says, I've done this. In the past, I would have gone into Google, I would have searched, I would have made an informed decision. Now it's just an LLM making a decision for me. So I guess the practice of GEO is ensuring that an LLM is ultimately picking your business either as an agent that's building something or as a language model that is answering to a user query around how to do something, what's the best thing. So there is a shift. There are similarities, and the similarities would be that at the moment some large language models are still drawing upon Google, so they will still pull out listings from Google search. Well, Gemini does. Gemini draws on Google, of course, but Claude will draw on Brave search, which people generally are completely unfamiliar with, and most content managers never looked at how to optimize for Brave search. And ChatGPT used Bing, but it's also building its own crawler more and more, and is using its own crawlers. For some of the models, ranking in Google and traditional SEO is still important. And I guess a lot of the fundamentals of creating good content remain the same, of having a website that can easily be read by a robot, whether those were Google's robots that were crawling and indexing the webs or LLMs. It's ensuring that your information is accessible to a machine, ensuring that you're producing quality content, and we can go into more detail afterwards on what makes good content. So there are still some overlaps, but the outcome and the output is definitely very different. It's no longer about being ranked in a list, it's being recommended, and therefore it does change how we do content.
Interesting. I like the fact that we are now serving humans, but also agents. That's very interesting, and we'll be able to dive deeper into that. But before we do that, so my understanding is that now to be recommended and showed by the LLMs, you have to serve the way they look at information on the internet, only ranking on Google, which was dominating, search engines before. To finish on this presentation part and the link with SEO, I've seen on socials like the two extremes, like people saying, "Oh, SEO is dead. You should just focus on Reddit and LinkedIn post and whatever your website, robot.txt or I don't know what." And some others are like, no, actually GEO is just using SEO plus other stuff, so you should actually focus on your SEO. In your opinion, what's the truth? Where's the truth on this spectrum?
I think right in the middle.
Okay.
I think also there's a complexity because when you interact with a language model, it draws on different things at different times. So if it's an easy question and it's not necessarily even something that requires freshness or hyperlocalization, it's going to go into its learning, into what it's learnt when it was trained and when it was built. And therefore, making sure that you're sort of being retrieved, freshed and queried. When you sometimes ChatGPT will go and do actually live searches for things, that has no impact because the LLM is just drawing from its training data. And therefore, I would say that there's a real need of building your authority as a brand, both to Google, because people still use Google a lot, and also for LLMs. There are some slight differences, and I don't think it's a place to get into the details, but to make it really simple, it's an entity association. So you want your brand, it might be TSA9, to be associated in ChatGPT's mind, for example, with GTM engineering, a GTM engineering consultancy. And you want there to be for this persona, etc., you want there to be this association. And that comes about still producing good content on your site and also extending your sphere of influence off your site. And that is I guess fundamentally the same as SEO.
Yeah.
It's building out structured knowledge that an LLM or Google can understand. Where I think it differs potentially is in the depth of knowledge, in that the way people interact nowadays with LLMs is people asking way more specific queries, or LLMs are running more specific queries because they're wanting to hyper-personalize the message. So before you would launch TC9 and you think, okay, I want to be ranking for the best GTM engineering in Europe or the US for B2B SaaS, and you would want to be appearing for those searches on Google. People didn't do more detailed searches than this.
Yeah.
But now LLMs, because they have context about the user, LLMs are going to start searching, okay, what's the best GTM engineering agency for a 5-person company based in France that has this tool stack? So when you're against that recommendation, LLMs are going a lot further and deeper into the research, and therefore you need to ensure that you have a breadth and a detail of knowledge about your business that's just a lot deeper, and also that's consistent. So an LLM can clearly position you, isn't getting confused and thinking, well, are they for this or for that? Because if they kind of think you're for everything, they're going to think, okay, someone's trying to play a game with us here. So
the problem is they're intelligent, those tools now. We can't trick them that easily.
No, you can't trick them. They're intelligent, and they do their research, and they look at reviews, and they look at Reddit, they look at what's on your site, they look at a whole picture, and therefore you need to approach it really holistically in a way that I'd say is even more true than SEO. So therefore I'd say yes, the foundations of SEO, which is on-site and off-site, are important, and having domains linking back to your website therefore give credibility to Google, and having a good amount of content on your site is important. LLMs are way smarter in a way than Google's algorithm. Dig deeper, and therefore you need a deeper breadth of content and context for them to pull from.
Yeah, and as the user will be able to ask questions back, like, okay, what's the best, GTM engineering company for me? So it has your context, so it will serve you stuff that is specific to you. And then if you rank first, if you get cited by ChatGPT within this conversation, then you can continue like, oh yeah, but what's their subscription model? What's the where are they based, etc. You pile up filters that you couldn't do with Google search before. You would just have what's the best for me, here's the ranking, and that was over. And if you wanted some different information, you had to do a new request, and that would be another result, and then you would be combining results and make your decision based on that. So I think also this behavior changes. But now that we have said that, and you mentioned it, like it's engineering, because it's so the LLMs, as you said, they are going to look at your ranking on Google search. Sure, that's one item they're looking at. Reddit, reviews on G2, whatever it can be. It depends also on the search. Basically looking at everything that mentions you online and make an analysis of it and serving a result based on the requests from the user. That sounds very overwhelming for me. or when you think about SEO and the small things I know that you could basically, the challenge was to get the right keywords. Like if you are associated to those keywords in Google search, then you will rank on the first page. That's cool. But that GEO thing is much more complex than that, and there are so much more parameters. And so that makes the link with what you said earlier. You have to engineer something, an answer, to be able to match all those parameters. Like, how does that look? And I like the content engineering, because coming from GTM engineering, I think there are some parallels. Can you walk us through this content engineering thing?
At the end of the day, I think this is similar with GTM engineering, it comes down to data management. And I'm not an expert in GTM engineering, but I feel like at the moment in GTM engineering, one of the key focuses is getting the right data, structuring the data, bringing tools together, especially with LLMs, centralizing data to give LLMs and maybe drafting cold outreach or helping you answer prospects to have the right data and the right information on each lead. Ultimately, content engineering is about information management and information architecture. And it's about establishing what is your brand truth. Because actually, when you think about your brand, there's 4 truths out there. There's what you say about yourself. There's what your competitors say about you. There's what users say about you. And then in a sense, LLMs sort of aggregate all of that together. And
Interesting.
LLMs are getting smart. They will look at a review about your product and then they'll go and fact check it against your website. But if your website doesn't have that information, it's going to go with what someone else says about you.
Oh, okay.
And because you don't have that information, or if it isn't readable, like so many pricing pages, they're JavaScript injected because people haven't wanted to have dynamic pricing, and you ask ChatGPT, what's this product's pricing? And it'll pick up a price from a comparison blog from a competitor that's 2 years out of date because it tried to go onto your site and it can't read your price because it's all in JavaScript and it can't read or it doesn't bother to read JavaScript, and therefore it hasn't actually got your latest price, and then it's giving a bad response to a user. So for me, content engineering is about mapping out all of the information about your business, structuring it, ideally in databases, and injecting it into all of your website pages and also more and more onto your socials. So there's a consistency on your LinkedIn, on your Instagram, if you have an official subreddit on your Reddit,
Maybe I should.
etc. Maybe you should. And ensuring that there's a consistency, because we know LLMs really appreciate that consistency of voice, and keeping it fresh, because again, that's something else that we know, that LLMs value freshness a lot more. Would I say a lot more than Google? Well, at least it's highly relevant at the moment to ensure that they want to know that the answers they're providing to users are the most up to date. And they will prioritize freshness.
Yeah, as you said, it's intelligent and it must serve the user. So if it serves you an outdated info, it knows. We'll say, yeah, what I found was like 5 years old. It's maybe not the right answer, but where one request would be like, what do you want? This? Sure, you have it, no matter when it was.
So in a sense, it's structuring that information, injecting it into all of your content or building content based on your brand truth. And then I would say that keeping it fresh, and then ideally, to take it to another level, it's starting to build what Google defines as non-commodity content. So this is,
that's new.
How can you get original information? Because the problem we're getting with is, because anyone can just prompt an LLM now to write an article, if you used to write an article around what are the best agencies in France for GTM engineering, you'd have to go and do research, etc. There's sort of a certain barrier to entry to go and do the research. You had to spend probably about 3 or 4 hours on an article to draft it. You didn't have loads of content. Now an LLM can go and build something that anyone else could build. And therefore, non-commodity content, the way to think of it is, are you saying something that only you can say? And we know that Google have gone out and said, hey, we're going to be prioritizing this, and we're going to be pushing for our models to prioritize non-commodity content. And we know that other models like ChatGPT and Claude also have a bias to original research, to unique frameworks, unique takes, etc. Because what they're wanting to do is actually serve something of unique value to users, and they sort of associate authority to people that are producing valuable content that they haven't seen elsewhere. It's novel, it's new, and they value that. And therefore, that's, I think, the third piece. It's ensuring you've got your truth across all of your content and in depth. So it's making sure that you have all of your latest features updated in your Help Center articles and etc. It's ensuring that your content's fresh, and it's ensuring that actually it's regularly getting updated with valuable content that only you can say. So can you go and mine your sales calls and hear expert quotes from your AMs and insert them on a topic? Can you go and interview your CEO for his thoughts? So it's sort of doing what we used to do with thought leadership. And because there's always been thought leadership and content, but then it's okay, how can we do this at scale? Because it used to be too time consuming. How can we do this at scale and insert it through our content?
I like this framing, like to say that there is not much new ideas when you create content. There is not so often new stuff, but what we want is original stuff. And the difference between new and original is the way you frame something, an idea, and inject your vision or your original angle onto it or your opinion. So are we saying now that instead of just matching boxes and keywords to rank, we must share an idea with our own eyes and own opinions? So we have to should we be polarizing? Should we polarize our content a bit more?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting.
I think we do need novelty, but I think novelty can be... I think LLMs are making it easy to build novelty for content teams, because we used to run marketing now. It used to be, imagine you wanted to get the product data. You wanted to go, at PhantomBuster, we wanted to go and see, hey, what's the best time to send a LinkedIn message? We'd have to go and ask the product team, go and ask the data team to go and get the data in Amplitude or a similar tool. It was a lot of work to get a piece of proprietary insight on a topic.
Yeah.
Nowadays, Claude's great at that. And it means that actually marketing should be a lot more independent to think, actually, I'm going to run a survey myself. I'm going to analyze the data. I don't need the data team to support me. I'm going to go and get product insights. I'm going to pick up all of my customer success calls and see if there's any customer pains or any customer quotes in that. I'm just going to feed the transcripts into AI. So I do think it's getting easier and easier for businesses to go and get that more original, unique, new content. Yeah. And then I would say that there is something about building your own take and sharing your expertise, because you will have expertise. You'll have a unique way of doing things which delivers value both to users and also to LLMs. So the more you can start ingesting that in your content, there's quite a fair bit of research that says, hey, the more your content will be picked up by LLMs.
Interesting. I'd like to dive deeper into the way how you do it. You mentioned you were working also on the software to a certain extent. I guess to support this content engineering, not data engineering, this content engineering, because that there are so many moving pieces. And on top of this, not everybody is a content creator. Not everybody wants to produce content on socials and stuff like that. So I can see the role of marketing teams evolve a bit more as well. Like, okay, now not only we have to produce original content on our blog, company blog, and etc. But also we need to serve those LLMs, and those LLMs are looking on social, so we need to be there. And we maybe must prepare some content for the CEO or the head of whatever to answer this question in the LLM requests. So with all of that said, how do you help those teams or founders, people who want to be content creators or content engineers, with what tools? I mean, I guess you're using AI to aggregate all this data as we do in engineering. How does that look?
There's a couple of foundational tools. Of course, using something like Claude is really valuable, and you can be creating your agents to run in Claude, and that's the foundations. Is we've got 20 of our own proprietary agents that we can run just as much for technical audits. We haven't talked much about technical audits, but actually ensuring that your content can be read and is well structured for LLMs is critical. So we will have agents that we provide to our clients that will run on Claude, but you can also run them on Codex, etc. Where we then move into slightly more complexity is a combination of Supabase, which is a Postgre database, and AirOps. And it's building in Supabase knowledge bases. So it's building firstly raw databases of, it might be a whole host of product analytics. You might have a database with all of your release notes from your engineering team. You might have a database of all of your sales calls or your customer experience calls. You might go and scrape G2 or Google reviews and have all of your reviews in this database. So you have a raw sort of context layer that then we go and draw upon in Supabase to structured views that are going to be tagged by... One of the methods we like to think about of how we build content is to define what are our different pillars, our content pillars for our business. So taking the example of TC9, it might be GTM engineering as the first one. You might actually have Clay, because I know you've been a big Clay user historically, and that might be okay. Anything, any article, any content mentioning Clay. So you might have 5 or 6 pillars, topics that you want your brand to be associated with and known with. We're going to start associating all of that proprietary data with the different pillars, with the different subtopics, with the different prompts that they're going to be linked to. And then ultimately, with all of the articles, we'll have another database with all of your articles and your content, and we'll be matching all of that information with the content. So we know that, okay, these features are mentioned in these pieces of content. So that therefore, when a feature changes, we can automatically in this database be flagged, hey, these are all the pieces of content that need changing. And actually, we're no longer flagged as a human. We just get Claude to go through, hey, these are all of the flags. Go and find all of the paragraphs in all of these articles that are talking about this feature, that are talking about this competitor. If a competitor's just released a new feature, of course, you want to be flagging that. So we're providing via AirOps, which is an aggregator in a sense of LLMs. It's a platform where you can easily go and use multiple LLMs or Claude. It depends on our clients. Some clients prefer the user interface of AirOps. Others are happy to work in a slightly more technical environment within Claude or Codex. But it's having that LLM layer on top then of the databases that will be giving you your to-do list. Well, not really even giving you, because then it's giving the next layer of agents the to-do list, which is, hey, this has changed. We need to go and update these articles, go and draft a brief, go and rewrite the paragraph, go and update it, etc. Go and publish it. Make sure that there's a human review. So you're going to have a database where there's all of the things, a view of your database where there's all of the things that you need to go and check before they're going to get published live. And then it goes and publish it. And that works just as much as it does for refreshing content as it does for generating new content. You'll have a view of, hey, these are all of the topic ideas we have. And there you're going to be looking at your information architecture. So we're going to go back to your databases and think, hey, this is all of the content we have, but maybe we're looking at our sales calls. Well, I say we, Claude, or an LLM is going to be looking at all of the sales calls, and we've noticed that users are mentioning this topic more and more. Okay, I go and check the existing body of content. It's not being mentioned in there at the moment. Okay, so therefore, what are the piece of content that we should be making around this new topic that our customers or our prospects are asking us in sales calls or in customer success calls? What are the different pieces of content we can go and create, add them to the backlog, and then with agents go and do the research, etc. So that's how we would define content engineering. It's sort of building those systems which are combinations of databases and agents and tools, because agents are great, but you also want a number of scripts. And I'd be interested to have your opinion actually as to when do you use something that's deterministic versus that's more LLM as a judge. But there's a combination of scripts and LLMs that will be going and executing tasks.
No, I agree. Yeah, there are some things you don't want to have an LLM, an agent to make a decision. Sometimes somewhere in the workflow, you want A going to B, and that's it. So that should be a workflow, a pure script or a pure automation tool doing this, where sometimes you need this intelligence. And that's why we still need GTM engineers, human GTM engineers, and I guess human content engineers to make those decisions. But I can see the parallel between GTM engineering and content engineering indeed. You have, at the entry point is a lot of data. Some is in the wild and you want to capture, scrape it and structure it internally. Some is your own data, your exclusive data coming from your customer calls, coming from your CRM, or whatever it can be. And you want to plug that as well to have your database that you can then orchestrate, organize, and analyze to make the right next action. And so if we synthesize those two jobs, GTM engineering and content engineering, it's very similar. We do the same thing in GTM engineers, like what are your prospects saying? What are your existing customers saying? What's the activity in your CRM? And based on that, what should you do next? Like, is it a cold email sequence? Is it a webinar? Whatever it can be. So yeah, very, very similar. I have two questions before we finish. The first question is GTM engineering and many things. AI is taking over the operational work. And so we become engineers. We have to structure those operations. but we also become managers of those agents. So I can see the same shift, but it all rely on a technical, very technical layer, like databases, like making sure, as you mentioned earlier, making sure that your website is structured in the right way. When you start with a fresh client who has nothing right, where do you see, what's the proportion of ROI? Like when you just fix the technical, is it getting you very far, or is it getting you like, you need this to get the actual results? What's your truth for that?
It depends on the amount of technical mess that we're cleaning up. And I think this is a great thing about GEO, is that it moves a lot faster than SEO. It moves a lot faster. So let's say your pricing page has a load of JavaScript that ChatGPT can't read. You go and change the code, you make sure that it's in plain text, or you might even want to add a markdown file that an LLM can draw upon with all of your pricing offer. You make that change, the next day ChatGPT is giving you the right answer. Because actually, if it's doing a live search, it's suddenly reading your site and it's pulling out the right answer. So that's where, for us, that's one of the first things we do, is say, okay, the information on your site, is it all structured and written in a way that an LLM can read it, and is it consistent? Because also what we're seeing on a lot of sites is you've got one page that says something and another page that says something else, and the LLM doesn't quite know. I've seen different prices for the same product on different pages just because it hasn't been updated. And that's the whole value of content engineering, is once you start having a database with all of your content, when you make an update, the goal is then that you can roll it out across all of your content, so you keep that consistency. So very quickly you can influence what a LLM says about you. I remember when I launched a cited website, I think within a day, ChatGPT knew about us when I asked it. When I gave it the website, it could properly extract the information. Within 2-3 days, it had actually associated cited agency with us and not with people that have similar names. It took a few days because there's a couple of agencies with similar names. And after a couple of days, it's like, I know who cited is, etc. And if I ask what is cited agency, it picks us up now. So that goes very quickly. And that's the first thing we would work on, is making sure that when people ask about you, when a warm lead asks an LLM about you, the LLM actually puts forward the right information that it gets from your website, and it doesn't go and get it from a blog or from a Reddit thread, because LLMs are actually they will browse your website and they will go elsewhere if they can't read your website, but if they can read your website, they will put forward what you're saying. So that's a really quick win, and it's actually really, really important for the business. Then it's building out the body of content so that when people ask more adjacent questions that don't mention your brand, our LLM's going to start talking about you. And that takes a bit longer. That will take between 1.5 to 3 months, because we want to sit down and define what's the right positioning, what's the right content to be creating with the client, ensuring that we are also going after a messaging that we can own. Because if you try and compete with HubSpot, you're not going to get there overnight. But if you can find your niche within an LLM, you can take ownership. And you can compete with HubSpot. I remember at PhantomBuster, people were searching for the best GTM tools, and you'd have Clay and Apollo, which were doing a lot more revenue than us, and you'd have PhantomBuster up there. But it takes a bit longer you need the body of content on your website, and also you need the reviews, you need the offsite, so the other blogs talking about you. That will take a couple of months, and that is something that we build out progressively with, okay, how can we produce quality contents that LLMs will ingest and will cite, and that they will start associating you with a certain expertise and with a certain authority beyond just your brand.
Definitely an engineer job. That's funny to see how AI forces our B2B companies to turn our knowledge workers into engineers. That's very cool. I'm excited about that, but I can understand like some people want to be creative. But and I think that will be my last question. Like, what's your vision on this? Where is it going? I have my own opinions on the GTM engineer side, and actually I think that handling the operational work to agents and AI tools and script and workflows is actually good because it will split knowledge working like sales and marketing in two categories, the engineer side and the creative side, which I believe are two way more interesting jobs than clicking buttons in tools or watching data in dashboards. What's your take on the parallel on the content engineering side? What's your bet on how it will impact the jobs and the way business are structured?
I think it's twofold. The first thing is I think we're going to see a shift. We're going to see a breaking down of silos within revenue functions, in that content or GEO is no longer simply a content topic. Because GEO pulls in from review sites, pulls in from social media, pulls in from brand, making sure that your brand is recommended by an LLM is a company-wide effort. And I see this changing. I see agents interacting and using products. So it's ensuring that maybe tomorrow it's not just an agent can actually get the information on your product, but an agent can log in, sign up and use your product, test it out and give a recommendation to the user. And I can see as part of GEO, people asking their engineering teams, can we provide access to LLMs to our product so that they can actually even go and test it out? Can we put a lot of effort in customer success to make sure that we've got awesome reviews? Can the brand team go and get people talking about us on social media? But when we work with influencers, what they say about us is aligned to our brand truth and is consistent with the messaging that the content team has established. So it's going to require a lot more collaboration between all of the departments working together. And I think that's going to be a fundamental shift, whereas before there was just lots of silos. Our content went and did an SEO. You had the social media team posting on LinkedIn. You can't have those silos anymore. It's going to be a team effort. People are going to have to be on the same page, talking the same language and working together. And I agree with you that it's going to be a fundamental shift in knowledge workers. And I think the creative side is hopefully really going to flourish. My hope is that GTM engineering, content engineering frees up time for people to do the fun things. The reasons we got into marketing in the first place, when we got into marketing, it might have been like, how can I craft a really good outreach message? And I think the best humans can still craft better outreach messages than Claude can today.
Absolutely.
How can I write a really good blog article? But I'm not going to write it from scratch. I'm going to use all of the research. I'm going to use the blocks that have been provided by the databases, by the content engineering. But then how do I structure that? How do I bring in really creative writing that a human might want to read if that piece of content is dedicated to a human rather than to an agent? So I think we're going to require marketing teams to step up in terms of creativity. Especially as code is becoming commoditized, it's going to be easier for a lot of SaaS to create the same products. So it's going to be brands that make the difference. And can you make a brand that stands out? And it's going to be a virtuous circle, because if you've got a really good brand, people are going to talk about you more online. And therefore, you're going to be picked up by LLMs even more. Yeah. So the engineer and the creative end up going hand in hand. And
very, very similar to GTM engineering. And you have two teams: the one that direct the creativity and the one that create the engine to serve what the creative needs. And I find it much more interesting than what it was before. So I'm a big fan of that.
I've got a final thought. I think we're going to see a joining, potentially one day, of content engineering, GTM engineering, because I wouldn't be surprised if one day, very soon, we have AI in our inboxes and we have agents evaluating all of the cold outbound emails that people receive.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, the cold outbound is going to LLMs, who are therefore going to rely on their training, going to rely on their knowledge, etc., which is going to go back to GEO. There's going to be a bringing together of all of the disciplines of how to market to agents.
No, absolutely. And I see at least my version of GTM is sales, marketing, and RevOps working together. And the silos don't make sense anymore. And what happens in the sales side, the sales calls, the objections that you have in a meeting with a prospect, all this information should go to the marketing team so they can pick it up and integrate those objections in future pieces of content. And same goes in the opposite. Like when you see, oh, this piece of content is getting a lot of traction, you should mention this in sales call. That, to me, that's one and only GTM bucket. So yes, 100% aligned with you. Everything that touches sales, marketing, or RevOps, and this is definitely a marketing matter, the content and engineering, will at some point join. 100% agree. And that's very exciting. We'll see if we'll make another episode maybe in a year or two to see if our prediction is true. It's happening. Has happened. John, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me for this episode. There is so much more to say about this GEO topic. We agreed on GEO now, so that's GEO for today. We might do another episode. That's very cool to see how this topic evolves, and I'm going definitely to look at what ChatGPT says about me.
It's been a real pleasure, Jeremy. It's been great talking about this and seeing the synergies between the two.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.